Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nikon Creators Hour. I am your host, Mike Corrado with Nikon. I've been with Nikon for over 35 years, and I've been taking pictures for over 40. And we want to bring you these amazing conversations with incredible photographers to inspire and educate you. And with us today, we've got Marcus Bell, who is in Australia, getting ready to go to bed, I guess, after this interview. How are you, Marcus?
Yeah, terrific. And thanks for having me along. I'm super impressed with what you guys have been pulling together with these creative hours. So it's unreal.
Yeah, and we can't thank you enough for giving us your time. And you and I have been working together for, over a decade now. So, we've worked with each other quite a bit, and I love your work. And I know it's going to be inspirational to anybody tuning in. And I always start with a bit of I guess, an apology for asking you to cull down your images into such a small portfolio. And we will talk about pictures that you make in portraits and weddings and the moments and the landscapes and the people. And then your thoughts on what had gone on during this pandemic and what inspired you to take pictures during the pandemic. But I definitely want to brag on you as an award-winning wedding photographer. But I found something interesting in your bio that says you're a self-proclaimed romantic, a self-confessed romantic. So that makes us, happy together. But how are you doing during these times, and what's going on in your world in Australia?
Yeah, going pretty well, especially now, and that I've settled into the new normal, whatever that is. But I think, for me, the first month, and coming back from WPPI, I found it a little bit tough, and I'll talk about that, as we go through at certain points. But then I just got this this bug in me about going back and working through some of my images that I don't normally get to work on, and so I've been really super pumped. One thing that I've always learned, is that as a photographer, I've been doing this 20 years, that you never ever learn your craft completely. There's something always new. And so I've been really, digging down and learning as much new things that I can, and being inspired by so many different things. And I think that's what's got me really excited again. When I first started out in photography, I started learning all different sort of genres, from motorsport, surfing, everything else other than, weddings, but then bringing those ideas into weddings. And I feel like I haven't done that for a while, and it's actually given me the time to do that. So it's been really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. And a lot of photographers I've spoken to said the same thing. They're either going back to books to be inspired, or they're looking through old images. I've gone through old drives and found pictures that in your fast edits while you're moving in the moment, you always miss a picture, along the way. I want to delve into, before we get into your pictures, a little bit of your background in photography. I'm always fascinated by the stories I hear of what made you pick up the camera in the first place and take this path, as a photographer, and now you run a really successful wedding business. But when was the first time you picked up the camera? Tell us that story.
Well, it's pretty embarrassing. The first time I picked up the camera was actually, I had a crush. I was in high school, and it was actually my geography teacher. And so she said, do you want to, anyone in the class want to learn a little bit more about photography? It's, extra work. And then I put up my hand. None of the girls in the class obviously did. And then two other guys did. And so we did this little course, and that's how I got into to photography. But obviously, nothing happened from there on. And then I didn't actually pick up the camera again for about 5 years. But it was sort of been a big thing that I guess what happened to me just after that is that my dad got ill, and I was only 16, and after a year fighting cancer, unfortunately, he didn't pull through. But the thing that he left me his camera and these photography books, these advanced manuals on photography. And I guess I didn't know what to do with them at the time, and I wasn't able to connect with him at the time, or with photography, until such time later. One day I don't know, I just picked up the camera, and then there was this passion, there was this something that I couldn't put it down, and it was it was incredible. And the funny thing is, I think my dad has given me the most amazing gift and probably taught me about photography the most. But the funny thing is, when he was here, he never actually showed me anything. It was everything that happened afterwards, and me reflecting on what it meant. And for me, it was about that I would go to a wedding once I got into wedding photography, and I would see all these incredible moments happening and these connections between people. And I started to realize is that I was compelled to capture them. And probably the main reason why was because I knew that some of these moments I would never, ever actually get to experience in my life. But it was like I was experiencing them through them. And then when my clients started to see these, I guess, these very emotive moments that I was capturing for them, they just fell in love with them. And so it ended up being this incredible connection that I had, and understanding through the grief and all these other different things that I brought into my photography that my clients actually ended up, just cherishing and still do. And it's what I love about, wedding photography. And I think what the power of, as photographers, of what we actually get to, do for and give our clients.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned, we had spoken earlier, you're about to do a newborn shoot. So you're more than just a wedding photographer, right? I mean, and the work you do is just phenomenal. I can't wait for people to see it, and just kind of teasing a little bit now as I show Marcus his pictures, but obviously you're diverse, and it's amazing because as you're saying that, it makes me reflect on the fact that it was my father who influenced my career. He had the darkroom in the basement. He's the one that actually found the ad in the newspaper. Remember newspaper ads, want ads, for a job at Nikon at a technical correspondent level. And it's big influence. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to move to your pictures now. So we have to share these. And really, really, really want to see and hear all of the amazing stories behind it and what brings you to this. And from the moment of thinking about what you wanted to do to the post process and any stories along the way. If you tripped, if you fell, if you broke your toe, I want to know about it. But this, to me, again, I look at your work as just, it's eye candy. It's stunning. Everything overall here, the landscape, the people, the size relationships. Talk about this image. Give us the details.
Well, we put ourselves in situations, but sometimes, there's always a bit of luck. And, this was actually a hot, steamy summer day, and we're on the edge of this, I guess, a mountain range. And all of a sudden, it was like a cloud factory starting to form. So I just was going crazy, and, just had an idea in preparation of what I wanted, to happen, and told them where I want them to walk. And so there's a lot of preparation that goes into these sort of images. But what's important is that, like, I'm not over directing. So, because I think for me, the power of this image is the gentle gesture of him lifting up her dress. And so it's all those little subtle things that I've learned that make a big difference, in communicating, within an image. I was very fortunate, like that, it was this image that got a perfect 100 score at WPPI, and it was the second time I was able to do it. And the first time was my first time ever entering WPPI. And it really probably changed my career, forever, because I think one of the biggest and hardest things to do as a photographer is putting yourself out there. And when I started showing these images, like these are, talking about 20 years ago, like this stuff wasn't ever done. And in fact, when I showed local photographers around, people that have been in the industry for a long time, they just said, like, this wasn't going to last. You can't even see their faces. No one's going to buy pictures like this. Fortunately, like I was, didn't listen to them and just sort of kept on my path. Obviously, this wasn't the only shots that I was, showing my clients, but it was a lot more personal and intimate moments that, we'll get to. But for me, it was about, giving them something different. And it was actually combining two loves of, what I love about photography. I got into photography by doing landscapes, but the thing about landscapes are, like, it's so hard. Like, it's like, you've got to have a center of interest. And I found that when I was early doing landscapes, I found it very difficult to identify what that center of interest was. and then highlight it and you know, do all those rules. But then when with wedding photography and, you know, bringing a couple in, I found it really easy because obviously the couple were the center of interest, and then I could just think about composition. So it really just sort of became very natural for me. And to, you know, combine, you know, my two passions. And I was very fortunate that, you know, probably I think it was like the second year I was in photography. I always thought, I don't know why, but like I never thought you could actually earn money doing what you love doing. And I came across these photographers. I went to and I think they're amazing. It's Dennis Montebelli and Gay Campbell, and I'm pretty sure that they're in New York at the moment, but they're incredible commercial photographers. I love them because too, like I was a big X-Files fan, and they took the photo of Mulder and Scully in the bed, and it was just super cool. Anyway, listening to their seminar all day, and then I went up to them afterwards, and I was really naive. And when I said, "Oh, you know, when do you get time to do the stuff that you really love shooting? Because your work is amazing." And then they looked at me really baffling, and you know, wondering what probably drugs I was taking. And I asked the question again, and they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you obviously get paid extremely well doing what you get to do, but when do you get to photograph the things that you really love doing?" And then it just said, "Well, this is what we love doing. We just happen to get paid well for it." And for me, it was like this, like, you know, flash moment. Oh my God, like, you know, what do you mean you can do something that you love doing and then get paid? And I guess that's sort of how this genre for me sort of started. And it wasn't only until like I realized that I had to put my whole heart and passion into what you were doing, then, you know, really, I guess, you know, things became, you know, like more successful as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's so many things I think about when I think about this picture. And in the thought process of you having to do it, did you find this location ahead of time? Was this something you found like in the moment? And then I want you to elaborate a little bit more, because obviously there's distance between you and the subject. And I think for most wedding photographers getting into the business, they're going to shoot the traditional stuff, very close couples, families, you know, maybe not think about having your bride and groom go to another location. So talk about what inspired you to, how did you find this location? How do you get the couple down there? How do you communicate with them while they're down there to say, hey, can you lift their dress? Are they doing it organically? Or, and then from there, you know, just any advice you'd have for anybody to deal with the time factor, because I could imagine not everybody's going to get that amount of time to be able to do something like that, but obviously it worked for you.
Yeah, like generally, like we probably got anywhere between 40 minutes and an hour between the end of the ceremony and the start of the reception. And so we do need to divide that time, you know, into close-up portraits and, you know, shots with the bridal party and things like that. And this is where, you know, like pre-scouting the locations is so important. So, and also knowing that you need to have like backup plans and, you know, if there's time restraints and different things happen. So I guess that's what I was saying before, like in preparation for a shot like this, even though that it may only actually end up taking only, you know, 5 to even 15 minutes to do, you know, that preparation is very key. So, and then also communicating with the couple is key too, because like I want to give them a path, and I will say, okay, you're going to walk from A to B, but from this tree to that tree. I don't want to say to them, oh, you know, pick up the dress or, you know, look loving at each other or anything like that. They'll know what to do themselves. I think if you give them enough direction, they can do the rest. And I think that's where I think sometimes if you're over directing, that's when you'll get a sense that it's not sort of gelling. Right. So a big part of, you know, what I do is you know, just making that happen. And there's a whole treasure trove of things that you can do when they're not sure. You know, one thing is that, like, you know, is that if they're just not connecting with each other for some reason, you know, we got to remember as photographers is that, you know, they're not professional models. So, and if they're looking at me as you know, a well-respected photographer, they think if anything's going to go wrong, it would be that they might be not be good enough. And because couples have told me that, and I'm going, are you kidding? That's crazy, that you might even think that. I think what's really important is that, like, you know, if you do ever sense that, you can say, hey, look, I've just got to swap lenses, or I've just got to swap cards.
Right.
You know, go to your bag, let them relax, and you'd be really surprised how their shoulders just drop, you know what I mean? And they just start chatting to each other. And then you can actually step back. And it's why I actually always use, you know, two camera bodies with two different lenses on one, you know, with a telephoto. So I can step back and then just start getting in, you know, using the telephoto, you know, and capturing that really precious moments of each other. Even in like a scenario like this, where, you know, this is really quite, you know, obviously wide. But then, you know, they've forgotten about you. You know what I mean? And then I actually see you photographing them, and then they're not worried about you because they're already into themselves.
Right.
So there's all these little things that you can do to help you get to this spot. And for this particular image is that I was high up on the road line, and the road actually goes down through there. And I just got the driver to drop them off, and I just gave them a rough idea of where to walk to. So in essence, it ended up being, you know, quite easy. But the real gift was that, and I never instructed him to do it, when he just sort of really picked up her dress. And, you know, and for me, that's what makes this photograph is that connection between the two of them, and that care, you know, as well.
So beautifully done. Thank you for sharing that. Great, great information there. Here's another beautiful moment. Talk about this image.
Yeah, I mean, man, this is what I love and try to do the best to my ability at every wedding. This is Karen and her grandmother, and, you know, Karen just, you know, walked down the aisle, and it's one of the things that some photographers actually, you know, like I've found, don't even register to capture those congratulations. I mean, and I think after all these years, I think that's really changing. But for me, it's like one of the most glorious parts of the day is there's so much joy and happiness and celebration happening. And it's always not just about the bride and groom. It's all the people that are there celebrating with them and around them. And there's a great photographer here in Australia called David Oliver, and he's actually a Nikon ambassador as well, or a Nikon ambassador. And
Nikon work.
He's like an incredible mentor to me, like, you know, and a great friend now, because 20 years ago, like, everything was just so staged, like, you know, it was very traditional. And you went to a wedding, and because I did this for a year, like, you know, I went and carried bags, didn't get paid for it, but just to learn, you know, about weddings and wedding photography. And I would go along, and it didn't take me too long to realize they were doing exactly the same shots, like, week in, week out. So I don't know why I hung out for a year doing it, you know, but because I pretty much learned what I needed to do over the first few weeks. But there was a difference, say, with a few, like, and I'm talking like 2 or 3 photographers in Australia that, you know, were, you know, pioneered really, I think, photojournalism, wedding photography, and David Oliver was one. And, you know, his work is still spectacular, but just back then it was just so different to the norm.
Right.
And that's what inspired me. And I, you know, like, it was all these little things that have happened in my life. Like, you know, there was a photographer when I was start to learn, you know, he introduced me to Magnum photographers. And then I was just sort of drawn to that, you know, and that's what I see at weddings, is that, like, these incredible moments that are just so sparingly and don't happen as often as we would like in life. But, you know, I think they're precious. And, you know, and like I said earlier, is that, you know, there's moments like this that I don't ever get to experience myself, but, like, I you know, I live them, you know, through my clients. And, you know, and it's, I don't know, for me, it's like a drug, you know, like, I have to, you know, capture this stuff at a wedding. And I think it's become so powerful. And I do know that it's probably the secret source of, like, you know, my business and my photography as well, because, you know, like there was been times, you know, where like I'm, you know, my clients even put me up on this pedestal, and, you know, and like that pressure, I think, to perform at each wedding is pretty great. Like, you know what I mean? It's a lot of stress to, you know, take in. And but then I came up with this formula and this idea. I actually asked the clients after the wedding day, what are their favorite images? You know what I mean? And they would always feed back to me, you know, they would pick one or two of those beautiful wedding scape shots, but the majority was stuff like this. It was just stuff that, and like photographically in some ways, it wasn't even my best work. But what was special to them was the connections that I've captured with the people that was most dear to them. And then I realized how powerful that is, you know what I mean? And how important in life is. And I think that's what, like, you know, I can't wait to, you know, get back into, and, you know, when weddings start back up, you know, and people can hug each other again, because it's probably one of the most fantastic things about life. And I think what people, you know, are struggling with, you know, and I think we're all finding it a little bit weird, like, you know, having to stand off, you know, from people at the moment. But I think people are just going to not give a shit, you know, because I think, you know, like, you know, this is more important, you know, the human connection between people, you know, and I think that's what's going to be pretty amazing going forward.
I think down the road, everybody will come back together, but it's going to take time, and we know that. But again, the moments are so precious, like you say. I can't stop looking at this image. Every time I interview photographers, there are images that just like, they just strike me. The creative process here, I want to talk about the creative, the location, everything, you know, here. It's just such a beautiful image. What's going on?
Yeah, you know, again, I think it's timing, you know, and sometimes we have to give like a little push along, because you know where that cloud is, and, you know, the timing that you've got where that could sort of go very quickly. But you have to appear like to the clients that everything's really relaxed and really, you know, you got to, you know, keep them really calm and relaxed. So it's a real balance sometimes, because you want to say to them both, you know what, just run in, but you just can't do that because you'll miss out on something. And so it is a balance. You know, photography is, yeah, it's a whole lot about the psychology side, even just not the photography side. And for this shot, like, I just love it from the point where I just love how they're encircled in that cloud at the bottom. You know, obviously it's a reflection from the cloud above, but how it's the power of their relationship, and them coming together, and in that circle, like, no one can affect them and no one can touch them. And that's what I love about this shot, is like how that just all came together. You know, when I threw this up on Instagram, it went nuts. Like, people just loved it. And then people were talking about the cloud on the top, you know, and how beautifully poised it is. But for me, it's the reflection of that cloud that unites them two together, and as well. So this is a location in Bali, called Alila Uluwatu, and I'm fortunate to keep going to go back to it. You know, and I was the first to, you know, use this location, and it took me a lot to actually get permission to do this. It's actually a small edge that they can, you know, probably 1 foot edge, and then there's like a little bit of a drop, you know, like maybe a few foot, or maybe 6 foot in some spots. So it can be, you know, a bit of a drop off, but then like 20 feet over, there's a couple 100-foot drop. You know, it's like, so it's pretty full on. So there is a lot of safety involved, and, you know, planning. And at first the hotel managers didn't want to do it. And then I explained to them what I was doing, and that would be all safe and everything like that. And then they agreed to it. And anyway, and the very first time I did it, like, you know, this place, it just went viral. And so now it actually made their hotel, even for weddings, really popular because of, you know, that shot. And I think that's the power of, like, you know, like, a photography, where bringing someone into a location that's with fresh eyes, and, you know, and what I love about, you know, being challenged, I guess. You know, like I honestly, I feel so blessed, you know, that these couples believe in me so much that they'll fly me, you know, around the world to, you know, and for me, then I feel that like I'm compelled and responsible to create something special for them and something unique. And so I'll spend, you know, a day or a day or two, you know, scouting the locations around the hotel or around the vicinity of where we might be able to go and do and have backup plans. And I guess really push my boundaries and thoughts to see what I can, you know, produce and do. And obviously, you know, then the client sort of benefits from that, but I do too. And I mean, and that's what's really cool about, you know, being a wedding photographer, I think, is that, especially when I first started, like, you know, stuff not being like this, and, you know, you were sort of boxed in, where now it's just really limitless. It's really, you're only limited by your imagination of what you can do.
Mhm.
So it's pretty super cool.
What I find unique too is you can have photographers come back to this location, but it's never going to be the same. You know, that
Yeah.
cloud is never going to be the same. So that shaping. Talk about two emotions right now, if you can.
Yeah.
Your emotion when
Well,
you click the shutter, when you're taking this picture, because you got to feel something from that. And how does the couple come back to you when they see this picture for the first time? What is their emotional reaction?
Well, I think that like what I was saying before is that, like, you know, where couples put like a high expectation of me, and then when it just gets like, they always come back and say they're just blown away. You know, like all those expectations are exceeded. Like, you know, they beyond. You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest reward. In fact, the image behind me is that same location.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the frame, you know, behind my head, and so you can see like all the clouds are different. My angle of view is different as well. So every time I go back there, like I'm always doing something different. You know, for the couple, and then there's just also different other angles and things like that. But it is truly like a magical place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to work in and be creative.
It's beautiful again, because I think a picture like this represents to me all the elements coming together the right way. Not too much wind on the water, which would kill the reflection a bit. You know,
Exactly.
the right timing, beautiful time of day, the blue, the simple palette of color.
Yeah.
Well done, Mr. Marcus Bell. Beautiful, beautiful location image. Talk about this.
Yeah, this is just for me like a great memory. You know, I was down in Canberra attending a friend's wedding actually, and he and my wife came with me, and my son Jackson at the time was 12 months old. So and she had to work down there on that day, and I was left to my own devices. Where, you know, running a pretty busy studio and everything like that, it was a rare time, and also to be able to spend time with my son Jackson. And you know, but on this day, I mean, I didn't like, I was super excited. I was showing him around, and you know, and like, you know, wow, I was showing myself around, and he was just joining me, like, but like I think like I probably got the worst dad award, you know, on this day, because like I just totally forgot about time. I forgot, you know, he's 12 months and that he should have had a sleep. And so we missed out on that. He was starting to get a bit cranky. So, and I think I may have forgotten to feed him as well. So I was not getting any sort of, you know, bonuses, you know, on this day. But so I thought we'd better go home. And so, or to the hotel. And then I wheeled him back in his stroller to the hire car. And I was in this car park opposite, you know, this scene, and I saw this scene, and I go, oh wow, that is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and I just had put him in the car and strapped him in and everything like that. I took a few steps to go and photograph, and then I realized I can't go any further because he's in the car. You know what I mean? And then
Smart
so then
move.
I'm looking at this scene, and then I'm looking back to the car, and I'm taking a few steps in either direction, and I was so confused of what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I decided to just go back to the car. I actually unstrapped him. I put him back in the stroller. I wheeled over, you know, to this spot, and I picked up the camera, take the photo, and the battery had exhausted. So I couldn't believe it. But so I just used the trick, hoping it would work. Is that I took the battery out, put it back in, and I was able to take one shot. And so this was that
Mm-hmm.
shot. Um,
Mhm.
so anyway, so I just love seeing scenes like this. You know, it's rare when it all just comes together.
Mhm.
Um, and it was just, for me, it was just this beautiful memory of why I'm a photographer. And you know, you know, I learned a little bit from that day about, you know, being a better dad, but
Mhm.
also carrying an extra battery as well. So yeah, so I think that's what I love. I mean, but I think it's funny because like one of the things I do love, obviously, is weddings, portraits, you know, and but you know, this is still like a big part of my life and what I get to do. And I think one of the things, like through my career, I've always, especially early on, I always struggled with, you know, understanding, is photography art, or you know, are photographers artists? You know, and it's always something that, like, I felt it was always too complicated. You know, and I was never ever think of myself as an artist. You know, I think like I felt uncomfortable, um, you know, thinking that way. And but then it wasn't until when I started narrowing things down and someone just, you know, said, look, you're making it all so difficult. Really, it's really simple. You know, an artist is just someone that, you know, expresses what they see something in the world with other people, and then they do it, you know, through photography. And I think when, you know, that was narrowed down for me, it really helped me
Mhm.
open up. And this is when I guess I started to learn a lot more about painters and other artists, and about composition,
Right.
even, you know, color theory, and so many aspects to the creative process now, that
Mhm.
and even that with this extra little bit of time on my hands at the moment, like I'm trying to learn as much as I can, and take in as much.
Sure.
And it's inspired when I know that I'm in front of a scene like this, that I can, you know, do my best, you know, and think about what might be distracting. You know, but then also, you know, think about it like a painter. You know, the great thing, what I love, how painters think now. I mean, I've always have always think, but I always struggle with, because I always see a scene, and that's the way I think it has to be, especially from
Right.
a, like, I guess, from a photojournalistic side of things. But then from
Mhm.
a creative side of thing, I think, well, if I was a painter and there was something distracting, well, I just wouldn't paint it in. So why couldn't we do that as a photographer?
Mhm.
Why can't we just remove something if it's distracting? Because it's, otherwise it's going to block me actually taking the photo.
Mhm.
So I'm always, you know, forever learning, and you know, thinking about that creative process. So you know, hopefully to produce, you know, better images.
It couldn't have been a perfect segue to the comment I wanted to make on this picture, because I would consider it, and maybe I'm making up a term here, very Rockwellian, because I studied in art school the famous artist Norman Rockwell.
Yeah.
And the beauty in the paintings that he did, the illustrations he did, was, you know, every person had a moment in there. There was something different going on. There were multiple themes and things going on, you know, within the frame, and that's what you've got here. So it's a very Norman Rockwell type of moment. So to me, again, the importance of studying art, you know, with photography is so critical. I saw this picture in the mix of your work. Again, we've done trade shows before. We've worked together on panel discussions, and but you know, I'm so used to seeing people in wedding gowns and tuxedos and stuff in your pictures. But you picked this picture for a reason. It's gorgeous. I love it. Talk about where, when, why.
Yeah, it was shot in the middle of the Pantanal. Like, I was very fortunate to be taken down to Brazil to speak. And funny, on the bill was like Mark Selinger speaking along, you know, side the two of us, and I was scratching my head. I'm thinking, you know, how is it possible that I'm, you know, speaking, you know, with Mark Selinger, and because he's such a, you know, an icon of our industry. And you know, like a friend in the US, Greg Gibson, got wind of that I was going to be chatting there, and somehow got, you know, got on the speaking side as well, because he's been going there for a few years, you know, capturing these cowboys with this other local photographer, a National Geographic photographer, Izan Patel, and he's just like amazing as well. And they said, you know, they said to me, you know what, Marcus, why don't you come out to the Pantanal with us? And I agreed, not really knowing what I was getting myself into, but I'm always up for an adventure and something new. Until I got there, you know, and then the reality, you know, kicked in, is that I was literally in the middle of nowhere. It was like going back hundreds of years in time. There was no electricity, no nothing. It was incredibly beautiful, but you know, but serious too. And then I'm realizing, what the hell is a wedding photographer doing in the middle of the Pantanal? And here I am with Greg Gibson. Like, Greg is like a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, you know, and I'm realizing that he's got the gift of the gab, like, you know, like all these years with Associated Press. And obviously a lot of the people where we were on the ranch couldn't speak English, but he was able to communicate, and he doesn't speak Portuguese, and he was able to speak with them and communicate with them amazingly. Like, and I was just blown away how he was able to connect, but without knowing the language. And then, you know, like I realized what some of the activities we would be doing and or, you know, or covering. And then obviously with Azan, I mean, this was his day-to-day job. So he was experienced at this. And I thought, what am I going to bring to the table? And I realized I could sit this out, like, you know what I mean? If I really wanted to, you know, like, but you know what, I thought, okay, like I'm here, like, do what you always do. Like, I was just saying to myself, do what you always do. Just do whatever it is. Like, you know, you see the world differently to, you know, other people. That is how you need to approach this. So with this shot, like, there was another shot, like I probably should have shown, but like where we're in this other corral and there's lassos going left, right, and center. You had to jump over them, and I had to get like initiated into it, and I was told like how dangerous it was. And in fact, the owner of the ranch told me that that's just how his father had died. He got injured in the corral with all the colts. And because there was no medical treatment, you know, he sadly, you know, suffered. So I knew where we were. It was pretty serious in what we were doing. And Greg said, the only way you're going to get the shot is actually in there with the horses. And I'm looking at him, are you serious? You know, like these things like were beautiful, but obviously up close, like, you know, very intimidating. And like, but they've got this beauty to them and this power, you know, and it was just incredible. And then, but they gave me this, they said, if the horses come to you, like rush towards you, and they said, do not move, you know what I mean? You stand your own ground. And then on this other day when I did it, like, you know, and we're jumping over lassos, and at the last minute, like this colt's just running towards me, and I was shitting my pants, and then I just moved out of the way in the last second, and then afterwards, you know, like I went up and apologized and said, look, I'm so sorry, like I did exactly what you said, you know, and I won't say exactly what they said, and they just said, are you serious? That thing was going to kill you. You know, you were so lucky that you know, like you moved out of the way. So, but for me, I come back to this shot because like that whole week I was really challenged, I think, in so many different ways, but there were some amazing connections that happened, and this was one of them, you know, and I look at this, and I've got this in my house, this print, you know, quite large, because the way I see it is that, you know, here is this colt, he's standing up for what he believes in, you know, and you know, there's this fear in his eyes, but you know, there's this fight as well, and he's not going to give in, and there's this powerfulness, and that he's protecting his clan. So there was all these things that I see in this image that for me is so important. And and so powerful. Not only does it take me back to that day, but you know, a lot of it for me is a metaphor through, you know, parts of my life, or even just through photography and the journey that a photographer needs to go through. I think is that, you know, we are challenged at certain times, and you know, and sometimes we do have to rise above it, you know, and that's where for me this was, you know, a powerful image. And then again, like on this trip, I was super blessed. You know, we were just finishing up, about to leave, and the guy who owns the ranch called me over, and you know, and he handed me his lasso, his personal lasso, and it was such an honor. I couldn't believe he was giving it to me, and but like, you know, I think he knew like what I went through that week, and he just respected, you know, what I brought, you know, to the table, like, you know, Greg and Azan, and you know, and I still have that in my room, just actually to the side. You know, it's pretty amazing memento of like an incredible trip. And so if anyone gets the chance to go to the Pantanal, I mean, I highly recommend it. It was one of the most incredible experiences in my life. It was so fabulous.
You know, when you brought up the lasso, I didn't know if you were going to, where that story was going to go. And I think the gifts you get along the way from people, or the little mementos, are just so important. I thought he was going to say, get back in there and lasso that horse now.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is nice because I love looking at my apartment is full of this kind of stuff that people have given me along the way, and those that I've met. It may not have anything to do with photography, but it's like, it's my place. It's my chi. Everywhere I look at, it makes me smile. So something like that is what that reminds me of. Now, one of the reasons why we want to have you on in the wake of the pandemic and COVID-19 was, as you said, you went back and you started looking at old hard drives, but something in your heart kind of drove you to getting out on the street and photographing, you know, the streets during these, you know, amazing times, these challenging times. Take us on a little bit of this journey as we start to wind down, of what made you shift gears. Were you frustrated? Were you, you know, creatively just on, I got to get out there and start shooting? For me, I went out for one day, maybe a half a day, a few hours, and I started photographing rubber gloves on the ground and in shopping carts and masks on the ground. And I was like, I'm done. I'm going to the backyard. I'm going to photograph birds. It's easier for me to deal with. It was just too emotional for me to just get caught up in that. And I knew a lot of journalists were doing this, so it wasn't my place. Talk about what drove you to this, and we'll talk about a few of these images as we go. But they're simple in nature, but very, very powerful as we move on into the collection. It's yours. Take it away.
Yeah, so I had this exhibition scheduled, and you know, I was really looking forward to it. You know, it was going to be a great excuse to have an opening, and you know, have a few wines with friends and things like that. But obviously, you know, things was changing pretty dramatically after we, you know, flew back in, and I started thinking about, you know, what I want to show, and so everything that I had in my mind that I was planning while I was traveling, you know, through Japan and WPBI, and then I gave myself 3 weeks to, you know, prep everything, and you know, once I got back, so everything I had in my mind just went out the window, because everything was rapidly changing once I did fly back in at the end of February and the 1st of March, and so this is actually some older work that I found, because what I wanted it to represent was how I was feeling for the whole series. So there's 3 separate series that would work together, and this is actually a suburb that I've gone back to a few times on my travels, and it's like a low economical, you know, suburb, and it sort of reminded me of where I grew up in Sydney. There was sort of places like this, and where, you know, there's a lot of characters, you know, like, you know, in sort of like a place like this, but also people that have, you know, experienced a lot of adversity in their lives and challenges. And what I find is that in a suburb like this is that they rise to the challenge. And I think that's what, with COVID is that like we had to, we have to, rise to it. And so when I was looking through these images, and I said, okay, well, and I remember taking this shot, and I was complexed by the lady, like looking in the funeral parlor home, like window shopping, and then having these two girls, like just sort of it's like so colorful, at the start of their life. And there was these stories that, that started to resonate with me. And then there was the story of the bikes that, one that's chained up, but there's a lock on the bottom right on the other one where it's like the bike, escaped, or it's on a different path or a different journey. And it was like where the girls themselves, at some point, they're going to face challenges in their lives where both of them will, be like on separate paths. And maybe only one, may even return to this town and, and be like that soul lady, looking in the mirror, sorry, in the reflection of the window.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like I started thinking about this whole series of how that would come about. And because, in this suburb of what they need to overcome and the power of that. And it reminded me of, that's what we would need to do, is to move on and whatever challenges came our way is to overcome them as well. So
yeah, I want to keep rolling with the pictures in the series. So this is not during COVID. Is this going back to your archives again, or?
Yeah. So this is the archive. So this is where like the I came across this family, and I said, could do you mind if I take a couple of photos? Anyway, so it ended up being this 40-minute train journey. And what I found, when I was taking these shots, like I realized there was so much more to them just on a train journey. They were going out on a day out on the beach. And what I found is when they saw a glimpse of the sea, their whole demeanor just changed. Like their faces lit up. They were so super excited. But a lot of the time they were just really down and really pensive, or, really, and then when we went through like industrial areas, again, like it was just sort of, a different disconnect, with the surrounds, or, and it's sort of like, it's like they were channeling, like, each scenery that, came past. But when I looked at the images and thought about it is, and I thought, what, this is how I feel sometimes, at points in my life, and even now, and this is what sort of made me decided to include it, is because, like you could get up in the morning, feeling great about the world, looking out, beautiful sunny day. Then you turn on the news and then you're just sort of smacked down, like, like, I don't know, brought back to reality. And then I guess there's other points that, like, I was looking at these images, and it's how I reflect sometimes, there is challenges in our life. Life isn't just easy. You know what I mean? Life isn't just, beautiful beach days or sunny days. You know what I mean? There's lots of other, bullshit that we have to, get through to get to the good days. And that's what I was seeing. Like, as we went through, they went through all these emotions. And that's why I just sort of was really connected, with just, capturing this series. So there's about 20 images in total of just different expressions, different, going through as we went through on the journey as well.
So connecting that to the current day of what's going on, because now we get into some pictures that I believe were shot recently. Or so, is it still part of archives?
Yeah, some archive stuff. But what I think what happened is that I saw this in a completely different light. So what happened was that these images, other than two of them, are completely new. And it was when I started re-looking at these images, I then was able to realize what I was connecting with and how emotionally of what I was feeling. And I think this is, feels like my darkest days through this whole part, but also like glimmers of hope and light, a life as well. And I think for that very first month, I was just like a lot of people, I think just bewildered, shocked, confused. I didn't know, what was going on. I didn't know, what was real and what was not, as well. I think I reacted to this like I've never reacted to anything before. I was really surprised in my own behavior. And I do know, it put even more of a strain of my family and relationship, because at first my natural instinct was to be a dad and to protect the people that I was living with. And so I was acting like I don't normally act. And so I thought, okay, well, do we need more food? Okay, let's make sure we've got that covered. For whatever reason, well, it's not a bad reason, but I built like a garden bed, you know what I mean? And built and made like a veggie patch. And because I didn't know what was going on and if there was more to it. And then when I was looking at these images, that's exactly how I felt. Walking through a paddock, just sort of bewildered. And then the fogginess was I wasn't thinking straight. But there was also the fog was there was a mystery to it, and also a scariness, to it as well. And it felt like we're all going in different directions. We didn't know where we were, and so especially this images, really made me feel. And then this sort of, for me, set the scene to the other images that I realized that I had that would represent, exactly. And because the other images that I was originally working on was, something completely different. And where, in fact, I did go out and do a bunch of images, because I don't know about overseas, but here in Australia, all our playgrounds were taped off. It was like a police scene, you know what I mean? And so kids weren't allowed to play. So I went out to expand upon these series and took them. And the good thing is that, the one exciting thing about not being able to print them, it gave me a little bit more time. And then I would be able to, print them down the track and then just expand upon these ideas and bring in the stuff that I shot, where there is a soul kid, looking at this cut off, playground. So it was this image here that for me, it was to be honest, more of a portrait of myself, and probably that way that I described that what I was feeling. And I think, just sort of, where I see this, as my other, the lady walking away as representing, my wife, going off, doing what she has to get done, and just, making everything happen. But for me, I'm like the gentleman in blue, where just sort of scratching my head, thinking, what have I done? Why have I been acting like this? So there's all these, aspects of that connection between, the two figures within in this image to just sort of, emphasize the, I guess, the stress of the situation, and how, that sometimes we're not acting the way we normally would act, through sure. a situation like this.
And then the empty street scene.
Yeah, I think for me, this is, for me a lot, where there's a lot of times where we stop ourselves. And I think at the moment it's that we've been purposely stopped, as individuals. And and stop everything that we've been doing. I mean, it's been forced upon us to, I think, reevaluate, you know, what we're doing with our lives, what we're doing, you know, day to day. You know, like I think one of the, you know, benefits that I found, you know, for the first time that we haven't done for a long time is that me and my wife, we get to, you know, sort of stop, you know, around the sunset and, you know, sit on a front step and just watch it, you know, for 10, 15 minutes together. And we normally wouldn't get to do that. You know what I mean? But I think it's definitely bigger than just me, obviously. So the idea of, like, you know, sharing this was that I think as a community, you know, we've been sort of stopped to rethink about, you know, what we've been doing, you know, and rethink the future, you know, and hopefully, you know, all of this is like an opportunity, you know, and really some really great, powerful things, you know, will come from this. And that's where this, you know, this show really represented that for me as well.
And I think this is a kind of a moment to share, and probably just say a lot of people probably have the same sentiments as you. And in some ways, these struggles bring out the heroes that are out there, the frontline workers, the essential workers. And certainly I wouldn't want to continue on without sending heartfelt condolences to anybody that suffered through this, this amazing time. And very, very powerful. And thank you for sharing that. Let me back out of this. And let me bring you back up full screen, Marcus, to see that beautiful smile again. This is the way I started off my day. This is the way you're going to end your day in Australia. Really powerful work. And I want to, again, reflect back on the beautiful images you've opened up with. And thank you for opening up your heart and sharing what you're feeling through these times. I think it's very important. And I think for us here in the U.S., I think around the world, different parts of the world are at different phases of this, but we will start to open up again. We're very close to that here in the United States, a little bit at a time. It will definitely become a world that may be different, and the new norm is the kind of phrase, the catchphrase that everybody's using, but we will be creative, and, you know, everybody's going to get back to work doing something, we hope. And I hope that everybody tuning in, you know, is inspired by Marcus's work. I certainly am. And we can't thank you enough for taking the time to put this together for us, Marcus.
Pleasure. It's been really great. And, you know, like I said earlier, is that, you know, I think it's just wonderful what you're doing with this Creators Hours, and, you know, looking forward to watching many more as well.
Well, if it wasn't for talented artists like yourself and photographers and journalists, we wouldn't have a Creators Hour. So thank you again. Those of you tuning in, I hope you were inspired by Marcus's images. And when we do get back to a bit of a norm, get out there and make great pictures and share them with us. We appreciate your time as well. Go to nikonusa.com/Creators Hour so you can see some of the work we've already posted and some of the things to come. We thank you for your time as well. So for Nikon, I am Mike Corrado. Everybody out there, be safe, and we'll see you soon.